Hey everyone, I'm Mr. Willis, and let's highlight J.P. Morgan. John Pierpont Morgan was born into a prominent New England family on April 17, 1837, in Hartford, Connecticut. In 1854, his father moved the family to London to begin his new career as a partner in the banking firm of George Peabody and Company. After finishing his education in 1857, J.P. moved to New York to work as a clerk at the American branch of his father's firm. Morgan showed promise as a shrewd businessman and struck lucrative deals with local merchants. His early success gave him the tools he needed to found his own company, J.P. Morgan and Company, in the early 1860s. In 1864, at the urging of his father, he paired with Charles Dabney to form Dabney, Morgan and Company, and the company began funneling their overseas investments into American companies, earning enormous profits and expanding business opportunities. Morgan's already successful career took a leap forward in 1879, when William Vanderbilt approached him about buying part ownership in the New York Central Railroad. Morgan used his wealth to buy 250,000 shares of stock in the company, securing him a seat on the New York Central Board of Directors. The following year, he gathered together a group of wealthy financiers and formed an investment group that pooled their money together to create the Northern Pacific Railroad. Following a decade of expansion and gains in the railroad industry, Morgan broke new ground by arranging the merger of Edison General Electric and Thomson Houston Company to form General Electric in 1892. Today, General Electric, also known as GE, is one of the biggest companies in America. At the height of his empire, J.P. Morgan was one of the most powerful bankers and wealthiest men in America. He had amassed an enormous wealth by investing in risky but profitable endeavors and consolidating the wealth he earned under the umbrella of the J.P. Morgan Company. Morgan had a keen skill for buying collapsing companies, turning them profitable again, and then reorganizing the company's stock so he can gain a sizable share of control in a particular industry. By the turn of the century, Morgan had used this strategy to gain control of approximately 1/6 of the country's rail lines. In 1898, Morgan again reorganized his company and became a major player in the steel industry by financing the formation of Federal Steel. 3 years later, after purchasing Andrew Carnegie's steel company for nearly $500 million, Morgan merged the entities into U.S. Steel, creating the first billion-dollar corporation. The immense scope of Morgan's power and influence in America was evident during two financial crises near the turn of the century. Morgan had accumulated so much wealth that he essentially became the bank that the U.S. government turned to when it hit tough economic times. During the Panic of 1893, with U.S. gold reserves seriously depleted, Morgan gathered a group of international investors willing to loan $60 million to the United States government in order to stabilize the economy. When financial crisis struck again in 1907, Morgan again intervened, calling a meeting of the country's wealthiest financiers and convincing them to lend millions of dollars to various banks and financial institutions in order to stabilize the markets. In both cases, Morgan had essentially been able to bail out the U.S. and prevent a recession, making sure his businesses didn't fail in order to ensure his own investments. Morgan's astounding success transformed the financial industry and left behind a powerful legacy. Although he twice bailed out the U.S. Treasury, his ability to do so left many unsettled, spurring the creation of the Federal Reserve System in late 1913. Critics accused Morgan of using his immense wealth to leverage the U.S. government into giving him favorable treatment and buying him a troubling amount of influence with elected officials. Today, his name lives on through the massive international banking firm he created, which entered the 21st century as J.P. Morgan Chase & Company. Thank you so much for watching. That's J.P. Morgan, and this has been your History Highlight.